This is kind of the mantra of the day, and we got it from the Clinton era. You know, it's the economy, stupid, right? But when I presented that, then Jason back there said, you know, I don't think we want to call people stupid at 8 o'clock in the morning. So you're dummies at 8 o'clock in the morning. But anyway, so a little Socratic thing here for a little bit. This is Chinese. Does anybody know what this means? I just thought for sure there'd be somebody to yell out what it means. But as it turns out, in China, there's 10,000 characters for their alphabet. In the United States, 26. So that kind of says it all, right? But anyway, what this means is gung-ho. And gung-ho, everybody thinks of like gung-ho as a military jargon, and if you were in the military, you know gung-ho is a thing. That person is really gung-ho. Applies to business as well. But the phrase comes from the American troops were fighting with the Chinese against the Japanese during and before World War II, and they used this phrase, and they got it from the Chinese. So gung-ho is a Chinese phrase. It's not a military phrase from the US at all. And what does gung-ho mean? The other Socratic part of this means work together. So it makes a lot of sense, right? You're in another country, you're with these other guys, you have a mission to accomplish. Well, the same, we felt like this was really true for retail today. That, yeah, we're working together, we're having leadership meetings, we're having team meetings and things like that, but a lot more work together has to happen in order for us to compete with the 900-pound gorilla and with the customer, who is, at the end of the day, the disruptor. So a brief commercial. I work for a company that is called WD Partners. And we call ourselves thinkers that do. We have two WD people here. You guys want to stand up? Mark on my left and Jeff. So please have a conversation with them. We call ourselves thinkers that do because underneath the services component, we have services that are a broad plethora of services from strategy and insights all the way to construction services. So end of ad. WD Partners, we're at wdpartners.com. That's the last you'll hear of that. This is the agenda, very brief and simple. I like to keep things as simple as possible. We're going to talk about then, and we're going to talk about now, because you are certainly full aware of both of those at the moment. And then we're going to talk about what we're seeing as next. It's the kind of thing that we're hearing it from consumers, because we interview about 8,000 consumers a year. So we get quals and quant from them, and we come up with some conclusions. So we're not just pulling this out of the sky somewhere. I'm not a mentalist. And so, the retail mentalist, let's see. Sears, no good. Right. But we're going to spend a majority of the time on next. And some of the things I have to say, I'm sure you're going to roll your eyes or whatever, but it's the type of thing that we're hearing that I would like to share. So back then, and back then, as I've said a couple times in other presentations, back then is like, what, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 8 years ago. It's not that long ago. But that back then, and even as far back as the 80s and 90s, worm was the thing to do. Does anybody know what worm means? More Socratic thing. I'm just going to stand up here and ask you questions all day long, except I have a time thing here, so I can't. But worm is a tech phrase that came earlier than the 1960s. And it was created because they started to perform worm on a number of different things with those huge computers that were the size of the screen. Worm means written once, read many. So it's commonly associated with a malware or some kind of spyware that's going to get into your computer system. But that's what it really means. So somebody would say, well, you got a worm. Well, in reality, that's what the worm is. It's going to read your computer and it's going to spit out many, too many. But written once, read many. And that was then. So we did that in retail with stores, right? We wormed everything. I see Sharon Lazard sitting here. I mean, we wormed our planograms, right? So if you didn't get the planogram for all like 500 of those stores, right, that was a fireable offense at one point in time, if you screwed up that planogram. So we wormed it. And at the time then, we had this prototype, and we had the prototype in like 1,000 different arrays of versions. Some are a little bit different than others, but not much. And we did that intentionally. So we sat in our headquarters, and everything was really great until disruption happened around the time of the dot-com bubble. We had a recession, then 9/11 happened, and everything really changed. By the way, along the lines, Amazon and Google and Facebook and all these guys were just coming into the arena. And so things were really starting to change. But for us, it was like, okay, we got to do e-com. I remember working for Walmart, and Walmart had their e-com in San Francisco, and then the rest of the company was in Bentonville. Does that make sense? It did kind of at the time. But all these other little balls we started to juggle, and really we kind of felt like, okay, I'm still the boss. Everything's fine. We got our headquarters. We can handle all this. Now it's a little bit disruption 2.0. And it's a little bit discerning as to what's going on now, because when we had all these bubbles that we felt we had under control, like e-commerce, off-price, and the off-price, wow, we're going to have 200 off-price stores, and everything started to change. But then technology really kind of made, and the customer made everything change tenfold, so it started to look like this. And then anybody that works for any retailer thinks, well, I got this one division, so I'm okay. But that's not really true, because the customer is doing all these balls. So that makes us, the retailers, have to juggle the balls as well. We have to figure how that goes. And so now we know the customer is the boss. The customer wakes up one morning and looks at all those balls and goes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. How the hell do you know that? How do you know what they're going to do? I'm in my kitchen, so I don't have time to go to whatever today, so I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to click on this. I'm going to click on this. Or I'm looking at the weather report, and this happens to me all the time. There's an ad on the side. It's like, oh yeah, I need that. You click on the ad to buy it right on the spot. That's a lot different than what we had before with Disruption 1.0. So I got this from Brian Cornell at Shop Talk this year, so 6 months ago. And you could say, okay, his business is a little bit better because of this, but I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, a lot of the things that are making their business better right now, they started 2 years ago. But it's the right way to think about things. Focus on the customer. But what does that mean? And for organizations and how companies are organized, how you're organized, what does that mean? To be focused on the customer. Well, the customer wants to buy things online. Well, duh. Well, what does that mean? And it turns out, too, that it isn't just one thing. It's like several things. They buy in different ways. They buy at different times. They buy from different channels. We'll get into that a little bit more in the future. So now, what used to be a nice little ball, and you had the prototype, and a customer had to shop and make a list and go there, now looks like a constellation. And we're kind of in the middle of this constellation. We're trying to pick here and trying to pick there. What are we going to focus on, and what are we going to do? And the customer's the same way. Like I said, they'll wake up in the morning and pick 1, 2, 3 and keep going on. So that's it for history and current. Now we're going to talk about next a little bit. So what does the customer want? One thing that we know that they want for sure, we've been doing studies on buy online, pick up in store for 5 years. This was the result of the first study 5 years ago. So we talked to over 4,000 consumers, and we asked them on a scale of 7, we only showed the top 2, 7 being high, we only showed the top 2 boxes. What percent digital retail integration would you like to see? 86% of 4,000 people across the country said, we want buy online, pick up in store. 5 years ago. So frankly, we were kind of set back by this, so we did another study the next year, same thing, 87%. So 86% of consumers want buy online, pick up in store. At this point in time, like 5 years later, everybody in this room knows that. Everybody in this room is trying to figure, how do we do that? The first company that we ran across that knew that, they came to us and they said, buy online, pick up in store is hockey sticking. It's like 3 times, it's going 3 times as fast as e-com in general. People want to just come to our store and pick up the stuff and drive away. When we tried to put together that buy online, pick up in store, we came in through development, and then we ran across merchandising. They're like, you can't have that space. We ran across operations. They said, you can't have our people. Well, we have X amount of people. We can't give you extra people. On and on, down through the road, down the road, like HR, we're not going to hire somebody like that. We don't even know what those people are. We're going to need pickers. What's a picker? Like we have people that work in stores now. Storage, you can't have that space either. So basically, what we were told was we can't get what the customer wants to get done. We can't get it done. We can't do that. And so what did we do? We put it at the back of the store. which is absolutely, from any of our studies, not where the customer wants to see the merchandise. They want it up front, they want it in their trunk, they're gonna go. They'll come to the store some other time, but right now, they want the stuff in the trunk. And the biggest vacuum that we saw was this, that there was no leadership of BOPIS. So there was no one person in charge that could go across every one of the silos and say, damn it, it's happening. I don't care about the merchandise, I don't care about HR, you get me the people, blah, blah, blah. I want people that are gonna work for me to do that. And we think we can do better. Just a couple of examples of what we've found recently, 5 years later, buy online, pick up in store. We've heard this a lot from retailers. Well, they won't download the app. And then there's stats that are out there because they don't want to reclaim the phone storage, they don't want to buy enough power, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's a challenge, but it's something that we've got to figure out. I took this picture myself. You can tell it's way better. So then buy online and pick up in store became something like this. Just pull out here. We'll have a special parking place where you come in there. We'll have the stuff somewhere in the store that you can pick up. How does that look like? Does that look like something that you want to get out of the car and go take a look at? And then this is an actual photo as well. Where's the buy online, pick up in store? Well, somewhere around there in the back of the store. This is something that the customer said that they want almost to the tune of 90% of 4,000 people, number one. And you can always, I just have to make a crack on this photo, you can always tell stock photography because everybody's smiling. I don't know, like why is everybody smiling? I don't know, they can't find their order, ha ha ha. So that's another factor, right? The order's incorrect, and that's been happening for QSR for a long time now. Now, this is a real shot, you can tell because nobody's smiling, nobody's even looking at me. But so the other thing is, let's pull up in this space here and text somebody and have them come out to the car. Wait, you know, that's not gonna happen. So this is what happens at the end of the day. 5 years later, we're starting to get this flavor qualitatively from consumers that say, we don't think that we want to do this anymore. It's like too much of a pain in the ass because of all the reasons that we just mentioned. We don't know where it is. They won't come out and put it in the trunk. It's really freezing out. I'm not going to go. So where do they go? The smiley face. Smiley face is going to drop it off on the porch that day with a little box, and the guy's going to knock on the door, and it's all over. That's not really what we want, right? We can thank the WD Partners designer for that shot right there. Another thing, and I'm just going to tell you about this, there's no backup like we just had, but I will tell you, like showroom stores is something that people really are gravitating towards within the last 3 to 4 years. As a matter of fact, people under 30 years old rate this 66% in the top 2 boxes, that they would frequent stores more often if they had showroom stores. So showroom stores like Bonobos, Beta, that type of thing, where you come and you scan something, it gets shipped to your house, or you pick it up somewhere else on your way out, and that's it. So showroom stores, whenever we've talked to somebody, it's the same story. Where are we gonna put it? How are we gonna do it? We don't have the technology. We don't have the cell phone. We don't have any of this stuff that can do it, and there's no leadership for it. So those are just 2 things that we know that consumers really want, but we haven't been able to produce it for them. And one of them is 5 years old. So are we really organized to the consumer? Are you guys really organized around the consumer, or are you organized around yourself and how you get stuff done? Or are you organized the way that you've always got things done and you understand it to be the right way to do things? And are we using technology for the best results that we possibly could? Like we were saying, well, the cell phone, they don't want to download our app, so let's focus on the app. How about if we find another app? Anyway. We'll get into that in a second. So 3 things. And the Harvard Business School rule of 3s will apply to this, even though there's probably a lot more underneath these. Number 1, we really feel from dealing with people and from talking to customers that organizations, like I was just saying, organizations themselves must change. Super simple chart. I don't want to hear about this later, like you missed all these other silos. But we are vertically organized as retailers. And I know I worked for one for a long time, a big one, for 11 years. We were vertically organized. Then you have the leadership, which is usually supposed to be at the top, but I just decided to do that from my personal opinion. But the leadership was supposed to talk to each other and get things done. But as we all know, that's a competitive scenario, right? well, you don't get this, I don't get my bonus, I give you all my storage space, my merchandise goes down 1%, what happens to my bonus, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that organization is how it looks now. And I would challenge, I mean, I'll talk to you guys throughout the course of this day and probably tomorrow, but how many times have you run into one of these other silos that didn't want to do what you wanted to do that was the right thing for the customer? Often, probably. So we came up with another super simple chart. Do not take a picture of this. But the idea is that we need to be more horizontal. And we got this idea from working, and I'm looking at Mark, I'm looking at you. We're working with a very large client that does this. So I'm not just, again, a mentalist about this whole thing. We know that this works. So if a customer has an incentive, they find out like 9/10 of all customers want buy online, pick up in store, and they want it done right, which is put in their trunk. They create a team that has IT, HR, ops, merchandising, store development, everything within that team. Then they go out almost as a separate company and execute buy online, pick up in store. Now, when that test works, it goes to a different area of the company and they roll that thing out. And it just rolls out. You know what I'm talking about, right? And so the same thing would be true with showroom stores. How come we don't see a showroom store from Walmart or from anybody else, from Best Buy? Why doesn't Best Buy have a showroom store? Why aren't there more showroom stores? Best Buy could easily have like a 2,000 square foot showroom store. Ship it to your house, right? Sorry, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. These are the guys that I'm talking about. So that's how they're organized. Mark had a party once. Mark's turning red. Mark had a party once where we had some people over from this company, from 2 different projects, 2 totally different projects, but they were projects like the ones that we just listed before. And even though they were in the same organization, like they were the same function within the company, they had never met each other before. So they didn't come from this silo and they all knew each other and then they worked, some of them worked here and some of them worked there. They came from this silo and they had never met the other people. So that's number 1. Organized wrong in the way we think. It could be a matrix, but the horizontal thinking is just not there from what we've seen to get these projects done as fast as they need to be done for what the consumer really wants. Number 2, bring digital and physical teams together to make one thing, which is really what we're talking about, because if there's a project that involved both of those, they would be together anyway. So the classic example is that we have a cell phone with all this really great stuff on it, and then you get into the store and you don't see any of it. It could happen conversely, but frankly, it's kind of not. It's happening this way. So there are techniques right now, like the Blaze method through Google, that if you work with Google, or the Firebase method, I'm sorry. If you work with Google, you can go in, you don't need an app. You can go in through 4, 5, 6 different methods to get to a retailer to buy online, pick up in store without downloading their app. You can also use Google Pay. A lot of people have Google Pay, and as I was informed, I think it's some 93% of the population has the Google app. You can also go in through the Google app, buy online, pick up in store. So the whole excuse of like, well, I don't want to download the app, that's out the door. And one last thing, now Google owns Waze, and how many people have used Waze? So you have Waze, you can also use Waze. The Waze is twofold for a retailer in that it'll tell you how far away you are. So you can go, well, Joan is like 15 minutes away, we got to get that order ready, pile the order ready. We know she's pulling in a driveway, you put it in her car, which is what we were talking about before versus the frozen tundra parking lot that you didn't want to go to. Okay, now I'm going to get a little bit esoteric. But again, it's from talking to a number of people, a number of retailers, and this is kind of what we think. There's no such thing as a store anymore. Not exactly sure what the name is. We've heard a bunch of different names from consumers, and I'm going to throw one of them at you today, but I don't think there's a store anymore. These are all stores, right? I can go onto any one of these stores. I can find anything I want, anywhere I want. All those names, ads, TV, marketplace, banner ads. I can go anywhere on there, press a couple of buttons, and buy the shirt that I wanted. Whatever that shirt might be, I can just do that. And oh yeah, there is such a thing as a physical store. We still have those. And I know a lot of you guys work in development, we have a lot of them. And I've talked to a number of people last night that are still opening stores, but you still need to think about this, that the consumer can buy any way that they want to. Remember the constellation that we showed earlier? That also applies to this. These are the tools that you use for that constellation. So we're thinking there's something out there called anything engines. I actually brought a prop, and it looks something like this. So with this anything engine, I have to go to Norway next week. With this anything engine, I communicate with the Norwegians, I look at my flight, I find out where I'm going, I find out what the best restaurants are, I can find out anything I want about it. What's a cool bar? What do people eat there? What do they wear? Oh yeah, I think I'll buy a shirt or something with that as well. Maybe I'll buy a sweater because as I understand now, it's gonna be really cold up there next week. So it's an anything engine. And the point that we're trying to get across and the point that we understood from consumers is these anything engines have taught us all to really think differently about how we think about shopping. Because anything I want, Rajesh and I were talking last night, and my brother came up with this phrase. He goes, there's no such thing as I don't know anymore. No such thing. We were talking about, who's that rock star that sang that song? Said, oh yeah, it was whatever, right? So you can find out anything you want. You can buy anything you want. These are anything engines. And if you think that your one-dimensional store where you stack up merchandise, I don't care what it is, and you think people are going to come and look at that after they've had one of these for the last 10 years, and young people having grown up with them their whole lives where anything they want, a date, is on that phone, then you are lost in the 90s. You are thinking about 1990s retail when you had that first ball and that prototype, and it was even before the disruption. You had your headquarters, and you just did whatever you want, and that happened. And they were telling me and Sharon Lazard, like, if you didn't do that planogram, you're fired. So what was once called a store should now be called something like an anything engine. Anything that you possibly want. And it's a piece of that constellation. It used to be the only piece, but it's not anymore. It's not even close to that anymore. So you think, well, is that impossible? Like, what am I going to do? I still have all these stores. I just talked to somebody last night. He just opened 160 stores. They want to open a lot more stores. They're doing really well. What do we do with these stores? And remember the phrase as you walked into the room, technology is the disruptor, the customer is the disruptor. The technology is not the disruptor. The customer is the disruptor. What I forgot there was the dummies part. So anything engines, just for a little inspiration, anything engines already exist. Some are understanding it, whether they're a .com startup or whether they've been around for a really long time. A lot of companies get it and they're making it happen right now. Like here's a place where I've been, and it's hard to imagine looking at me up here now, but I have attempted this, where you play an employee of that company, it's videotaped, you got 10 seconds, you see that 1.0 on the back wall there? You got 10 seconds, goes 10, 9, 8, and you got the ball, and you got the guy, and you're moving him down. This is all videotaped. You take a shot, you miss, or you make it. That video is then sent to you. You give them their email, they send it to you. So that store has a basketball court in it. This store has a band playing in it. So you can walk by, and obviously a lot of people thought, wow, that's a great place to go see a band. They also sell, which I think I've just kind of recently found out, and I don't have the credit cards on there, but now they have a credit card, they have bike helmets, they have jump ropes, they have back massagers. Oh yeah, they have phones and some other things too. So diversification of product extension that we didn't think about before. We always used to talk about brand permission. I don't think that's necessary anymore. And start to produce different ways to draw customers and keep customers' attention. I had somebody tell me once from a .com and said, well, this is the attention economy. And that, to me, sounds like a truism for stores as well. How do we keep people's attention? How do we keep them in the stores? What do we do? How do we talk about that? Inside that skater store, and you've all heard of this brand, they sell ping pong balls. They sell chess. They sell beepers. They sell voodoo dolls, which I think is really great. I could use one of those, I think. They sell voodoo dolls. They had a thing, I saw this. I didn't actually see it in the store, but I saw it in an article. They created a chest just for the fun of it, the founders of this company. And it was a red, chest, like an old clothing chest that used to take on the Queen Mary or whatever. And they put a sign on it and they said, if you love us enough and you're stupid enough, you'll pay anything for this. It was $689. They sold them all out in a day. An anything store. So here's one of the best restaurants in New York City. It's on top of a furniture store. Here's a place where you can try on all kinds of really cool merchandise. And by the way, get yourself on Instagram with 10 million people and 10 million likes. Whoever gets the most likes gets a discount on the product. Here's a store, one of my favorite stores in London, in South Ditch. It's called Cheeky and Neville, really. I don't know why we have that name on there. But you can get a haircut. You can go buy some used clothes. This is all like in one store. You can get a great nosh. You can get something to eat there. And they have a little movie theater off to the side. And one of the last times I was there, I saw Clockwork Orange. It was a lot of fun. H-E-B is trying all kinds of new things. I really like what H-E-B has been doing lately. So they created this food hall where trucks pull up, all local trucks pull up. You sit there on picnic tables and you buy whatever you want to. So they become sort of an anything engine for food. So when you go there, you think, I don't know what I want to eat. Well, let's just go to H-E-B because we're bound to score. They're also doing these with these WeWorks type of places because they know the gig economy is big, especially in Texas. So what they're doing is creating workspaces, charging money for people who live in workspaces. This is a grocery store. And I think that's the thing about an anything engine, that it takes a shift for retailers who have been selling shoes all their lives. We sell shoes, that's what we do shoes. And if we lose our focus on shoes, we're gonna lose our minds. That's not true anymore. Look at Supreme, one of the hottest brands ever. I mean, they sell everything, voodoo dolls. H-E-B, a grocery store. This is store out of San Francisco. So what they do is they have a new showing and then they publish the showing for beauty products where they get anybody who started online. You started with your laptop and you started this beauty line. You get to show it off in this store. So their next big release is going to be in November. I just checked it out today online. And what you do is you go in there with your friends and you check out all the new beauty product and you sell it and you meet a brand new brand and then you go back online and you buy whatever you want to buy. So it is an anything engine for beauty products. You can buy anything you want in there and any startup that you've never even heard of. That's a great idea. And then old school, back to buy online, pick up in store. Starting to be done right. That doesn't look great. It looks good, but man, it works. It's like the most functional thing ever. You pull up, punch in your number that you got online, you pull up to the next stop, throw it in your trunk, you go home. Works. So they got it. They started to get that. They started to do a lot of different things, train people differently. And I always say, Walmart bought Bonobos. Why did Walmart buy Bonobos? For that showroom algorithm, right? Now they know how showroom stores work. So can you imagine a Walmart, I don't know, a tenth of the size of one that is, and you scan it and then you go home. I'll show you one. Amazon. So Amazon's done the same thing, basically. Amazon does use Waze. So they know when you're coming, that within 10 minutes of it, they get that order ready. As soon as you pull up in one of those spaces in the center of the picture there, somebody runs out, sticks it in your trunk, you drive away. Done. Order complete. And neighborhood goods. They just opened in Plano, Texas. They just got funding to open more stores. They're going to open one in New York City pretty soon. Basically the same as Restore, where they're going to invite anybody who starts an online brand to come on in, and they get a certain period of time to show it off, and then move on. So you go in that store. Every time you go in that store, that is literally an anything store. Anything could be in there. Whoever you are. If you start an online business right now, Mark, you start an online business tomorrow, you can go in neighborhood goods and post it up in there. And they say, look, we got Mark's new goods there in neighborhood goods. Plus, apparently, they have showcases and speeches, and Serena Williams goes there and speaks as well. praise. So, no such thing as a store. I think what we used to call a store. I don't think there's any such thing as what we used to call a store. It's a much different perspective. What was once called a store is now more like an anything engine, a physical anything engine. And here's one that we did for a big box. And this is one of the things we put it up in our space. So when you walk through our space, we take a look at it. This is one of the most talked about postings that we have. Basically what we did is we took a big box store, and it's easier exemplified in a big box store, so pardon me. But we moved an existing big box store, that is dimensionally correct, moved the back wall up so that it was 50% of the store. So 50% of the store is a fulfillment center. So though Target, as you guys probably read, does 80% of their online orders, they fulfill them from their own stores. I thought it was a phenomenal number. But if you do that and you have 4,000 stores, you have 2,000 stores, you have 1,000 stores like some of these big box guys do, and you start just fulfilling orders, shipping it to the neighborhood with electric cars or whatever you want to do, that's an outstanding idea for the way things are moving along. You become more like an anything engine. Just ship it to my house, I'm going to press a few buttons that you have and it comes to my house. The front part of the store we call a social playground. So in there you can go grocery shopping, you can go to a yoga class, you can do a community center thing there, you have restaurants there, you have coffee shops there, you also have all kinds of merchandise. And what you do is you scan the merchandise and you press buy, 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 buy. And then you go out and back it in your car, pull up on the side and take it home, or you can just have it shipped to your house. So stores, like stores of the future, become more like anything engines in that you go there, do anything you want, also purchase things and have them shipped to your house. Very similar to an anything engine. And just 4 examples of the same type of thing. So that a specialty store on the bottom, if it could be more of a hangout spot, like Spaces 24 or something like that Urban Outfitters did, a coffee shop, you can also check yourself out, Instagram, and also ship things to your house, buy online, pick up in store. And every single one of those is like that, like a 24-hour convenience store, a ship-to-home grocery store, and an Eatsa type of store where you press a few buttons, go up, get your food, and go home. So summary, really quick. We really feel like organizations must change, that the horizontal aspect of how an organization works needs to come into play to get that project done that the customer wants done. Because the way that we're set up now with silos, it just takes too long to cross over and too protective, and the way it's structured just makes it almost impossible to do. So bring digital and physical teams together. And I think a lot of that has been done across the board, but I think there's still a long way to go. And also digital and physical teams. I mean, there's a lot of great companies like Waze out there, I think, that are doing great things that you can bring in so that you know when somebody's pulling up to your store and make a big difference. And I think there's no such thing as a store. And again, you know, it's like one of those things that you tell your kids, I don't want you to ever do this again. You don't ever want them to do something like nothing again. But I think the mentality of no such thing as a store is where we need to get. And also, just so you guys know, the 90s were over 25 some years ago. And that whole then that we started out with is certainly a much different ballgame at this point in time. This is the word that I hear all the time. And I all through the aughts, and anytime we do a design project or an innovation project, this is what we hear. I don't know how you can cost a prototype because you don't know if the prototype's going to work. What are you costing a prototype for? But really, what we started to talk about was what's the cost of not? What if we don't do that and then somebody else does, or somebody else does way better than that, or somebody takes it to the next thing? Like the cost of not learning something by trying something new is way more than just the plain cost of actually executing something. And I thought I'd put this picture of Jack Ma in there. He resigned the other day as CEO, and I just thought, I thought that picture was really stunning. Anybody agree with me? Like if my CEO looked like that, I don't know what I'd think. Like would I think like that was really cool, or would I think, God, that's awful? But I like the quote, today's best performance is tomorrow's baseline. Take that into consideration. The other thing, just to tweak in the back of the head, I read the other day that 7,500 stores have closed so far this year. We haven't even got to, like, when we get to January, you know there's going to be a boatload of stores. It's harmonic convergence of lease debt expiration. 7,000 stores have closed. More stores have closed already this year than have ever closed in a single year before. So there's obviously some kind of sense of urgency about what we need to do. We think going horizontally and getting consumer-oriented projects done is a really big deal. So we got to work together to do that, right? So gung-ho, everybody, and thank you very much.